The Kola hole was an enigma. In fact, it still is an enigma. Most people don't fully understand how deep and large this hole is. For comparison, the Kola Superdeep is higher than Mount Everest and Mount Fuji combined, deeper than the Mariana Trench, and it's even said to be larger than the asteroid that killed all the dinosaurs. Which begs the question, why were they digging that deep? And most importantly, why did they stop? The United States started Project Mohole in 1958 as a way to get a sample from the mantle of the Earth by drilling to the bottom of the ocean near Guadalupe Island, Mexico. They dug 183 meters into the seabed with funding from the National Science Foundation. But the project was put on hold by the U.S. House of Representatives in 1966 and later got canceled. But even by then they had achieved some level of success and were being praised for it. The Soviets saw the advancements made by the US, and this spurred them to make their own. In 1970, the Soviets started drilling into the Earth in Murmansk, Russia. The drilling effort was led by the USSR's Interdepartmental Scientific Council for the Study of the Earth's Interior and Super Deep Drilling, which spent years preparing for the historic project. This project became widely known as the Kola Superdeep Borehole, and it was more successful than the American project, penetrating much deeper into the Earth and collecting samples that still wow scientists today. You see, Earth is like an onion. The layer we live on, where everything physical exists, is known as the crust. It is like the onion's skin, and each layer of the onion represents another layer of Earth, before we can finally get to the center, or the mantle. Below the crust is the more malleable mantle, making up nearly half of Earth's volume. And the Soviets and even the Americans wanted to get there, to know what made Earth tick. The Soviets' drilling rig was designed in a way that core samples could be taken along the whole length of the drill shaft. This gave researchers on the surface a close-up look at the Earth's makeup as the drill went deeper. Now before the drilling started, geologists had come to a number of conclusions about what could be found in the Earth's deep crust, based on readings and seismic data. I wouldn't be surprised if some bets were made. But as people often find out when they go into the unknown, the Kola borehole showed that certainty from a distance isn't really certainty at all, as most scientific ideas or theories were disproved quickly and easily. When drilling began at the Kola Superdeep Borehole site in the 1970s, the first time there were no issues. Everything went smoothly. For example, the drill plowed through the granite rock effortlessly. But when drillers reached about 6.9 kilometers deep, the layers became more dense and more difficult to bore into. Because of this, the drill bits broke, and the team had to change the way they were drilling more than once. But this was just the start of their problem. As a consequence of malfunctioning equipment, several drill paths were drilled until a pretty vertical path was finally achieved. By the time you look at the various paths created, it started looking like a tree with multiple branches. But at least a path was found to keep going deeper. As the drill kept going, the Earth got hotter. But this was normal and expected. The scientists already expected and planned for a temperature difference up to about 3,000 meters. But as they dug deeper, the heat got worse, until it hit a whopping 180 degrees Celsius at about 12 kilometers below the surface. This blew the scientists' expectations out of the water. They were expecting the temperature to be about 100 degrees Celsius, so getting a reading of 180 was a big change. They also found that the rock was much more porous and permeable as they went past the first 4,000 meters. That, along with the very high temperatures, made the rock act more like a plastic than a solid, which made it almost impossible to drill. This was something no one had ever seen or even thought of before. The experiment done by the Americans in 1966 didn't reveal any of this. Scientists were also expecting layers of basalt at about 7 kilometers deep, but they were never found during the drilling process. In fact, no layers of basalt were found at any level. Instead of basalt, they found more granites, and they were deeper than expected. And as if that was not intriguing and confusing enough, another surprising discovery was made. They found a small pool of water 3 to 6 kilometers below the surface. It had seeped up through the granite until it hit a layer of rock that couldn't let water through. And this water did not evaporate on its own at any depth, despite the scorching temperature. This was mind-blowing. Also, 6 kilometers below the surface, tiny remains of plankton were found, indicating signs of life. And these single-cell marine organisms date back 2 billion years. It got to a point that every time they drilled a hole, they found something unexpected. But all these achievements didn't come easily. As they drilled deeper into the crust, the rate of accidents increased. The worst one happened after a team took a break to attend the International Geological Congress in Moscow on September 27, 1984. When they returned to work, it was the worst day in the history of the Kola Superdeep. When they stopped drilling, some of the walls that weren't fixed with a cemented steel pipe became deformed, before finally collapsing. And just like that, 5 years of work went down the drain. In 1995, there was an explosion at the deepest part of the well that no one could explain. The digging had to be stopped because of it, and the cause has never been found. With all these accidents and dead ends, it would take another 6 years before they could reach the record-breaking depth of 12 kilometers. Despite all these discoveries, accidents, and groundbreaking depth, you wouldn't believe that they only reach like 0.2% of the Earth. A depth that could hold 2 mountains was literally the surface level of Earth. It didn't even reach half of the crust's thickness, which itself is very thin on a planetary scale, especially when compared to the almost 3,000-kilometer thick mantle below. Scientists working at the well had hoped to reach the core or mantle at least, but it would have taken another 30 or 40 kilometers. After a few more accidents, people started giving up on going any deeper. From an engineering point of view, it looked like the Earth no longer wanted to reveal its secrets. The scientists wanted to keep drilling, but their drilling tools couldn't handle these temperatures, and even though they kept going until 1992, the Soviets never got any deeper than the depth they reached in 1989. Drillers had to give up because they weren't able to reach their 15.3-kilometer goal. In 2005, the drill site was closed for good, and the hole was covered. Now, the official story was a lack of funds and technical problems. Some even say it's because the Soviet Union became defunct, and as such, no one nation could fund the gigantic project, which has traces of truth in it. But there's another reason that made them quickly shut the hole, and why, despite the improvement we have in technology, is also why no one will ever go back there again. The actual truth is that they stumbled upon something that stunned and sent shivers to everyone who was present. Rumor has it that the discovery was so disturbing that some of the scientists who witnessed it went insane for the rest of their lives. There is one urban legend in particular that creeps out a lot of people when it comes to the Kola Superdeep. According to legend, the scientists lowered some equipment to investigate the cavity where the drill had penetrated. They also lowered a microphone and recorded some sounds before it melted. They brought the equipment back to the surface and assessed it, especially the recording file. And what they discovered or heard terrified them to the point that most of the workers quit that day. We have the audio recording of what was heard, and I must warn you, it does sound disturbing. Make sure you turn on the lights, or be in a brightly lit room. Here it goes. That really was scary. It is believed that when the scientists were digging, they might have struck the one location every human is scared of: hell. And what you just heard were millions of burning souls screaming in agony. The high temperature that couldn't be explained at such depths, the sounds they heard, and so much more, which I'll get into later, all these when added together were showing the possibility that we might have mistakenly stumbled on a place we shouldn't. At once, a large number of scientists turned around and joined the fundamentalist movement. Some left the scene, and some, like I said earlier, became insane. There are many who are even certain that the reason the drilling stopped was not because of any superficial reason like lack of funding, but because of the devil himself. Later that evening, those who stayed due to trying to rationalize what they heard, but still being logical, would receive an even greater shock that shattered their logical reasoning. They saw a plume of luminous gas burst out of the borehole, and I kid you not, a shape of a gigantic winged demon unfolded, and the words, "I have conquered," in Russian, were seared into the flames, before disappearing. Adding a final bizarre touch, it was said that military medical staff administered a sedative to all those present, wiping out their short-term memory, and only a lucky few can still remember the events of that day. The story was allegedly first printed in 1990 by the Finnish newspaper Amanosastia, which was published by a group of Pentecostal Christians from Leivasjoki, Finland. The incident was so intriguing that somehow the Trinity Broadcast Network, TBN, got a hold of the story. This Christian network runs a print newsletter and television broadcasts, and in late 1989, they published an article titled, "Scientists Discover Hell," in both their print and broadcast editions. They also ran an expanded version of the story with the recently discovered detail of the demonic apparition emerging from the borehole. The story was picked up by other Christian periodicals, such as Praise the Lord in February 1990 and Midnight Cry in April of the same year, and from there, it became a hit. According to the Trinity Broadcast Network newsletter, the Finnish article had been given to them by a Texas evangelist, R.W. Schambach, who was a frequent guest on their network. Schambach claimed to have gotten the letter from Age Rendelin, a Norwegian man who had verified it, along with an article from a respected scientific journal in Finland. Rendelin informed the network that he had traveled to the United States a few weeks prior and had stumbled onto their Drilling to Hell program. He was so compelled by it that he wrote to the network. "Admittedly, I laughed when I heard your story. I told my friend that I didn't believe a word of it, and that Americans were really stupid to think that hell could actually be found in a hole in the earth. I can't even begin to express how shocked I was to see so many stories about this occurrence in the newspapers when I got back to Norway. I was instantly certain that, should there be a hell, I would definitely wind up there. I had a terrible terror that gripped me for 2 nights, during which I had dreams about burning and screaming, until I gave my life to God and trusted Him to keep it safe." Rendelin continued in the letter to urge the network to present the narrative without allowing skeptics to get in the way. He gave more details about the drilling and attached a copy and translation of what he said was an article from the biggest and most respected newspaper in Norway. According to Rendelin's translation of the text, government intimidation was used to prevent the scientists from informing the rest of the world about their discoveries. Then a new detail was added to the tale, which was based on eyewitness testimony given to Rendelin. Aside from the voice recordings, what really alarmed the Soviets that night was the appearance of a fountainhead of luminous gas shooting up from the drill site. Out of the midst of this glowing cloud pillar, a being with bat-like wings emerged, bearing the words, "I have conquered," in Russian, against the pitch-black Siberian sky. He noticed emergency staff moving around the neighborhood later that evening. He was informed by a familiar driver that they were instructed to put everyone under sedation with a drug that causes short-term memory loss. This medication is used by the Soviets to treat shock sufferers. If this witness report is real, it means the reported events seen on blogs, YouTube videos, and basically everywhere on the internet was genuine. This added some sort of authenticity to the claim. Despite this being the center of attraction for everyone, this wasn't the only weird thing happening at the site. Of course, I've talked about the temperature reaching 180 degrees Celsius, which baffled scientists, but there was also the disappearance of drilling equipment. During the project, a number of drilling equipment items were reported missing or unaccounted for. While some have theorized that the severe conditions at the bottom of the pit may have contributed to these losses, others have hypothesized that something darker, like interference from subterranean civilizations, or even otherworldly forces, may have been to blame. Also, the Kola Superdeep was drilled for more than 20 years, but the scientists were never able to reach the bottom, giving it the name the Bottomless Pit, and some people think this could be a passage to an alternate dimension. People all around the world are still fascinated by the mysterious happenings and unexplained phenomena connected to the project, and despite the important knowledge that was obtained throughout the drilling procedure, one of the biggest mysteries that still remains is the exact nature of the Kola Superdeep Borehole. Then you now find water that exists under conditions it shouldn't. Even Christians have some theories to add to all this. They believe that the water found in the Kola Superdeep is another proof of the flood in the Bible. Northwestern University scientists discovered that 1.5% of the rocks they studied were made of mantle material, which is derived from volcanoes. Further research led them to conclude that the amount of water beneath the Earth's crust is 3 times more than that of the world's oceans. The pressure and temperature down there are quite high, which keeps the water liquid and forces it out of the porous rocks. In Genesis 7 verse 11, it says, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. The rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. The key word in this verse is great deep burst forth. This tells us that along with the heavy rain, water also came from the earth, and not just from anywhere, but from deep inside it. And the Kola drilling did prove that water was found deep in the earth. For me, the scary part of this is that they literally only scratched the surface of the deep, so I can only imagine the depths, widths, and height of the waters that is below, or as the Bible calls it, in the great deep. One thing that comes to the mind of everyone watching this video: how true is all this? Did they really make contact with hell? What's real and what's not? For starters, everything I told you in this video is real. The scientists' equipment was missing, some got destroyed, and the temperatures were high enough to make that place considered a part of hell. And yes, a lot of unexplained things happen. It's all true. But what people forget is that it is normal when charting unexplored regions. Navigating unexplored regions is the one time we're all wrong and lucky to be right. It's like playing a new game. You don't know what to expect or how to fight, run, and all that. And if you decide to use previous gaming knowledge, there's a high chance you will fail woefully. For example, prior to the drilling, the Russian scientists had a preconceived notion of what was to be expected. But all these were theories until it was disproved by actual facts, and that's normal in the realm of science. But one theory in all of this was a lie, and nothing more but a story. And I'm pretty sure you know which one. The story of Well to Hell. First of all, the Finnish newspaper, Amanosastia, which is quoted in nearly every account of the story, is real and is located in an area called Leiväsioki. But the publication is a monthly publication of a group of Finnish Christians, rather than the theory of it being seen as a respected newspaper or scientific journal as we had all been informed. The drilling to hell narrative originated from a staff member's oral history, who had seen it as a major article in the daily newspaper Etelä-Suomen, a daily publication published in Finland. It was, however, in a feature section featuring letters from readers who could write about nearly anything they wanted, basically a Wattpad section of the newspaper. I'm going somewhere with this, so stay with me. Further investigation, and the author was found, and through an interpreter, he said he couldn't confirm how true the story was, and saw the captivating story through a Christian newsletter published by a group of Finnish missionaries named Vaeltajat. Next was Vaeltajat, and the editor mentioned that the article appeared in their July 1989 edition. How did he find out about it? Well, he got it from a reader who said it was in a newsletter called Jewels of Jericho, which was issued by a California-based Jewish Christian organization. And that was the end of the Finnish trail, but not the end of the investigation. Remember the guy who wrote to TBN saying how he believes them and they shouldn't let skeptics keep the network from telling the truth? He was next to be investigated. Luckily, he was alive and living in Oslo, Norway. When he was contacted, he came out without a doubt in his mind to say everything in the story was false. This doesn't make sense. When he wrote the letter to TBN, he was certain it was real, giving his personal accounts as well as eyewitness accounts of what happened at the site. That's when he released a bombshell. Not only was the story false, but he also claimed that he was the one who made up the story. Åge Rendelin explained his reason for lying on such a massive scale. According to him, he had traveled to the US a few weeks prior and witnessed the host of a Christian television program telling the drilling to hell story with great enthusiasm. It was unbelievable to me that the hosts actually believed the story to be true, and that they would air it without seemingly doing any research. And that's when he came up with the idea to prove that not only was it easy to concoct lies, but that people, especially Americans, his words not mine, would believe anything. Rendelin wrote up the vivid tale of the bat-like monster and forwarded it to the television network after returning to Norway. He assumed they would adopt the story without any research to show their level of journalism. He even put his name, address, and phone number on his letter so they could have an easier time conducting an investigation, or at least fact-check their source. He also included a piece from Norway's largest and most reputable newspaper about the incident. The item, which he mistranslated, was actually about a construction inspector and appeared in his neighborhood newspaper. Additionally, Rendelin provided the name and phone number of a buddy who was a pastor in Southern California. The pastor was aware of the hoax and was ready to provide the real story if someone had just asked. But as expected, the story was picked up by Trinity Broadcasting Network without getting in touch with either Rendelin or the California pastor, or even any form of research, and it was featured on radio, television, and in tons of newspapers. Nobody made an effort to do any research. And this is what sets Motech apart, by the way, from other channels, and why you should click the subscribe button. We do the research, provide both theories and critics' opinions, and let you draw your conclusions, or in some cases like this, show you the facts even if it shakes the very core of your belief system. Regretfully, TBN's probe came too late to stop the harm caused by a rumor that was extensively circulated across the Christian community. Now that the incident and his actions have come to light, Rendelin has made an official statement describing what happened and saying that it is all just a Christian urban legend with no facts. As for the audio we heard that gained millions of listens, turns out it's actually a layered and looped audio section from a horror movie. Most people think it's from the 1972 horror movie Barren Blood.
Today we're going to be debunking the Sounds from Hell audio file that's been circulating around the web. The story originates supposedly in Siberia, where they were drilling and they get a few miles down, they hit a cavity, they lower a heat-resistant microphone down, and they hear horrible wailing sounds, supposedly to be the damned, burning in torment. I'd like to start off by saying that I'm a Christian. I had a near-death experience in which I saw hell. I very much believe and know that hell is real. However, this story is not. The sound file is from a movie called Barren Blood. Let's give a listen to the Sounds from Hell audio file. That's enough of that. Now let's listen to the Blood Baron.
With a little imagination, you should be able to envision the torches and hear the screams that echoed through here. Those recorded screams in the Baron's day were real.
30 voices from Blood Baron sound like a few hundred. But in case you're not convinced, we're going to listen to them both together. This is the original Sounds from Hell file. This is Blood Baron. I know what you're thinking, they don't sound the same, but let's listen to them together and see if there's anything that stands out or that is glaringly different.
That analysis was done by a YouTube channel by the name JC Woods, and as we can see, everything matches. As much as I want this story to be true, I think we can all agree that the only real thing there is the fact that the Earth is really deep. Though all of this doesn't answer why they haven't revisited the site again for further research. But I guess Rendelin was right. People will believe in anything, no matter how outrageous it sounds.